Hello, and welcome to the Path of Most Persistence. This is a place where we hear and share tenacious stories of overcoming obstacles with our partners who dare to share a bit of their own personal paths. Ross Guieb is the Executive Director for the George H.W. Bush Combat Development Complex at Texas A&M University System Rellis campus in Bryan, Texas. He is a decorated combat veteran and a retired colonel with 29 years of service in the U.S. Army. His background in executive-level roles in the Pentagon and the establishment of the Army Futures Commands provides tremendous insight on how to best support national security research priorities. Colonel Guieb holds a bachelor's degree in international relations, 3 master's degrees in business and organizational security management, adult education, and national security policy and resource strategy. He is also a graduate of the FBI Academy and received professional certification for the study of terrorism. Colonel Guieb is married and is the proud father of 3 sons. 2 are currently ROTC scholarship with the Corps of Cadets at Texas A&M University, and he considers himself a soldier for life. Colonel Guieb, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure and an honor. I want to begin with where I just ended. What does it mean, soldier for life?
I was going to say, you probably could have shortened my entire bio that I think my mother wrote to say that he's a dedicated husband, he's a faithful son, and a father of 3 young men. And I would say the last thing would be that he's an American soldier. Could have probably covered all that in just those couple lines, but I appreciate the intro.
Well, listen, I appreciate that, and I know that goes back to being a soldier for life, probably. You're a modesty, but we're here to talk about you and to celebrate you because you are an extraordinary individual that is within our network, and we want to highlight that, not only to celebrate those things about you, but to share inspiration for those around us, and especially to our audiences, especially those young people that hopefully would be inspired by you and want to emulate some of the things that you've done in life.
Sure.
So with that, there's so many areas that I want to visit with you, but I want to know about the 29 years that you spent in the Army. Why Army? Why 29 years?
So I'll say why Army first. So I'm first generation Filipino American. So really we have our roots of coming to the United States because both my grandfathers fought in World War II, of which one was a Bataan Death March survivor, and really wouldn't be in this country if it wasn't for their service to country and their really chasing the American dream to the betterment of their family. So my paternal grandfather came, the one that was in Bataan Death March, came in 49, and then my father, being the oldest boy, was the first person from the family to come over in their early 50s, and then really, then the rest of their family came in, and my mom came in the 60s, and my parents met in San Francisco, where they were married in the mid 60s. So it really, the roots of my family are really around service and really service around the military. So I have many uncles and cousins that have been in all different services and all different conflicts, from World War II to Vietnam. So it was a natural progression, natural step for me in my own mind to serve. Now the 29 years part was not planned. I think the 29 years was really, for me, was about working with other people. I played team sports my entire life, and I felt like no better team than, U.S. Army team to be a part of. And that's exactly what I did. And, the 4 years that I was supposed to be in the military turned into 10 years, turned into 20 years, turned into 29 years, turned into moving my family 24 times, having my kids go to 9 different schools, and really having visited and lived around the world. And it was all really about the people. The American soldier, you meet people from the South, from the West, from other countries, and they all come together and have a common set of values. And I mean, really, that's why I did it. And why I'm on the team that I'm on now with Texas A&M University Systems is because of the values that they have, which is very similar to the Army values. And I believe that, I had to take off my Army camouflage, and it was nice to put on the Maroon camouflage because it was really seamless for me.
Well, that is also very impressive. And I want to start by thanking you for your service,
Thank you.
for all the service that you yourself have given, but to your family and your extended family. We're so grateful for all of that. And we're going to have so many different listeners. Mm-hmm. Some may have a military background or having a true appreciation, but some will not.
Yes.
So some of the questions, please bear with me, because hopefully some of these questions will be illuminating mm-hmm. for those that don't have an understanding of military service.
Sure.
So my question is, when you're raised in a family, you are brought up in a family where service is the air you breathe. Mm-hmm. You've had these grandfathers that had tremendous service and had tremendous experiences. For you, that's normal. That's mm-hmm. the air you breathe.
That's right.
But how is it? Because it seems as though there are other people that have had similar experiences, and they turn their back against service because they don't want to experience some of the stories that maybe they've heard. So for you and your experience, how is it that you maintained the desire to stay that course? And how do you explain it to those that may be friends or colleagues or young people that you've come across that have never known anyone that has been part of the service? How do you explain that love, that desire to serve?
I think once you, the brass tacks of being in the military, at least the Army's mission is to win our nation's wars. But I think a lot of people don't realize that there's many things in between having to fight our nation's war. As a soldier and as a father of future soldiers, that's the last thing we want to do because we're actually there. But the idea of humanitarian missions, the idea of working together as a team from people from all walks of life. I've had people work with me that their parents were millionaires, and I had people that grew up in the inner city in the country. And when you can shape them to be an American soldier, a soldier that understands values and understands selfless service and team before self, it really motivates you to stay in the profession. And that's what it is. For me, it wasn't a job. For me, it wasn't a 9-to-5. For me, it was about love of soldiers, love of being on a team, and then honestly defending the Constitution of the United States. As you know, we don't hold allegiance to a person. We do it for the Constitution, to protect the Constitution. And I think that's what makes us different. I've served as an exchange officer in England, and they have allegiance to the Queen. Mm-hmm. We hold our allegiance to the Constitution of the United States. And that's kind of the main difference. And to watch young people, I always feel like there's 2 types of soldiers. There are leaders and there are future leaders. And if you try to train them, if you try to show them a pathway to success, I think that they're very grateful for that. And 2, I think they really fall in love with the aspect of selfless service. Because it's not an intuitive idea that you're going to put somebody else's well-being before yours. So
I love that you say that. It is not an intuitive idea, mm-hmm. but I think it's one that transcends experiences, because once it is done, once you have given yourself or put yourself up behind someone, in support of someone, serving someone. I think there's this feeling, no matter who you are, of innate goodness that seems to radiate. Right. And when it becomes part of your life, part of the air that you breathe, that's just, you understand it, you see it, you feel it. But just one more question, again, for those that don't have the background, near the background that you do. Can you explain to our audience what it is to be a decorated combat veteran?
Yeah, well, for me, that's a little bit tough, right? I actually spoke to somebody recently who asked about the different medals that I wear, from Distinguished Service Medal to Legion of Merit or Bronze Star. And I said, every one of those medals, somebody else earned, right? I was just the one that was receiving it, and I was part of that team. I never, nobody goes after a shiny medal or a ribbon to put on your chest. It just happens because you're on a really well-oiled machine. And a lot of it has to do with the many deployments, either combat deployments or humanitarian deployments, and then tours to the Pentagon, which sometimes some people would say is more dangerous than going to Afghanistan or Iraq. I say that tongue-in-cheek because that's really the corporate headquarters for the Department of Defense. And there's a lot of tough decisions made there. And I had the fortune of working with some fantastic leaders at the highest level of our Army. Actually, being the executive officer to the Secretary of the Army was one of the highlights, I would say. Wasn't leading 4,500 soldiers in a brigade, but the decisions that were being made affected a 1.2 soldier Army.
No doubt.
Million Army, sorry.
I know, it's impressive. No doubt you have had mentors and leaders that you've looked to, that you've been led by, and there's probably numerous, probably too many to name today. But if you have maybe a couple, one, two, a handful that you would just like to identify?
That would be tough. I would say first would be my parents,
yes.
And my grandparents. Probably would be first. I know they're not military or they're passed away, but certainly the shaping of a person, now being a parent of three, is really a lot tougher than it seems when you're growing up, right? Mm-hmm. Until you're on the other end of that, trying to make sure that you are raising, in my case, three well-rounded young men that are ready to be global citizens, right, and then be citizens of the United States. And on the military side, I hate to put out names, but I've had mentors that were subordinate to me.
Yes.
I had mentors that were my peers, and I had mentors that were superior to me. And, as I tell young people as I'm talking to them, you have to align your values and align your ethos and your work ethos, the warrior ethos, with the people that you think that you want to emulate. Mm-hmm. They're not picking you to say, I'm mentoring you, although some do. Yes. I look to those, it's rank agnostic, right? I just find people that do things for the right reasons, no matter who is around.
With that in mind, that being said, what are those characteristics then? If it doesn't matter rank, what are those characteristics, those traits that those people have that really are a standout to you?
Character. I think if sometimes people look at competence, but competence without character is basically a technician in my mind. I look for people with character, with high virtue, integrity, loyalty is important, and those that are respectful for others. Right? Just because you're a colonel or just because you're a general doesn't mean that you have to degrade anybody that's junior to you in rank. Right? Try to listen with an open mind, and then at the end you have to make a decision. So all need to follow. Right, but at least you have an open mind. And it all also depends on the situation of time and the other factors that go into it. But the true essence of being a leader is the process of providing purpose, motivation, and direction towards accomplishing a mission or making your organization better. And I think the other thing that people confuse is this idea of likership over leadership, right? Sometimes you won't be the most popular guy because you're making a guy or gal because you're making a really tough decision. But sometimes people don't see all the things that you see in making a decision. It might not just be at the surface. There might be second, third order effects that maybe somebody's not looking at. So those are some of the things I look at. I know that was kind of it seemed like a whole laundry list, but I think all those kind of encapsulates what I look for in somebody to be a mentor.
That's wonderful, and that's helpful. I think too, and before we get into your leadership, your current leadership roles, which I'm very interested in learning more about, but again, over those 29 years, you've had to take a lot of orders before you started giving a lot of orders.
That's right.
And that process, young Ross Guieb.
Mm-hmm. That was a long time ago.
No judgment here. But that, 29 years ago, when you first started out, what were some of the hardest lessons for you to learn in taking the order?
Right. First off, I started when I was 3.
Okay.
Just for the record, so everybody understands that. So, I think understand how to be a good follower, right?
But what does that mean? You need to go into the details. What does that mean?
To be a good follower, I think will make you a good leader. Mm-hmm. So being able to take orders and understand that and understand how those orders are being given to you helps shape you as being a leader. So if they're very directive all the time, don't get me wrong. There are times we need to be directive and authoritative because the time or the situation requires it. But there are other times where that's not the only way to approach giving guidance. So you, as a follower, you learn different techniques. I learn as much from a leader that I despise than I do a leader, as much as a leader that I really hold on a pedestal. So that's one. And then one of the hardest things that will really test you as a leader is when you're asked to lead your peers.
Yes.
Because leading your peers, in my estimation, it's probably one of the hardest things because, every one of them has an opinion. And everybody wants to do it a certain way. But when you're the person in charge, you're the person that's making the final decision. Mm-hmm. And how you get to consensus is really an art of leadership, not the science part of leadership. It's the art of leadership. So understanding people, understanding the human, the human landscape and personalities, I think is really important. So studying people probably is, a key aspect of that.
Now I have to step in a little bit closer.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference between the art and the science of leadership? I know there's finesse in there.
Yes.
But what does it look like for those that are wanting to learn something from you today?
Yeah, I think the art is how you deal with people that is not measurable, right? And it is a sense. A lot of it is feel. A lot of it is through experience. Either your own experience or being on either side, yes, on the person taking the orders or person that giving the orders. Mm-hmm. And then looking at people who do it right and how they do it helps shape me as a leader. And then watching people do it wrong, right? Yes. And then shapes me as a leader just as much. Your leadership is probably one of the toughest topics to talk about, so I appreciate you putting me on the spot and really kind of teasing that out. But I do believe the difference between our military, the U.S. military, and others around the world is really this idea of leadership. And this not just from the senior person, the leadership at all echelons within our service. That means the sergeants, non-commissioned officers, who are the backbone, at least in the Army, and then the young, like, as I said, leaders and future leaders. Those young people that have that, just innate ability to have people follow them because they have that charisma, they have that confidence to pull it off.
That's great, and I thank you for bearing with me on that. And I just know you're probably the one of the best people to explain the difference. So thank you for going there with me. One more question before we head on to your current position. You mentioned when you talked about your sons wanting them to be global citizens. And I know in a previous conversation you had mentioned that. And I really appreciated that you said that, because we're copacetic in that situation. And to our audience, can you talk about what it is to be a global citizen?
I think that so that my kids have lived all around the world, right? So my oldest son was born in Hawaii. My the twins were born in London, and the idea of understanding other cultures, the idea of understanding other countries' politics and policies and why people do the things that they do is really important. It helps shape why we do things, right? And it makes you appreciate what we have in this country.
Yes.
When you go to place, I don't want to keep calling out different places, but when I've been to Haiti, when you go to a place like Haiti, which is not too far away from our Florida coast,
Yes.
It makes you really wonder what the difference is and why our country is thriving as it has been for so many years, and what the downfall of some other, not Haiti but other countries, what causes that. One, it boils down to leadership, right? Is something we've been speaking about, but it also boils down to the culture and the policies and what the goals are for those countries. So I want them to have open minds, because it helps them look at problems from a different perspective, a different lens, and not, sometimes always not the only way.
Yes, yes.
So.
And thank you for saying that, because especially in the time that we live in and everyone's connected, you're only a click away, so
That's
to
right.
speak. I think it's very important as a trait for our young people, all of us really, to have that global citizenship awareness at least, because we are so close, and it does. It either helps you to be more appreciative or understand how, where, or how and when we should be making improvements. So thank you. So on to your current position as the executive director. Again, so good having you. The complex that you lead is quite impressive. Again, the George H.W. Bush Combat Development Complex at the Rellis campus is so impressive. I need to spend more time there. I've only visited maybe I'm going to say 1.5 times.
Okay.
But can you tell us what your responsibilities are there and what the mission is there at the Rellis campus?
So the responsibility really is to lead this kind of $200 million, now it's more than that now, startup. And it's a series of facilities that make up the complex. So the first one, and I'll talk a little about each one of those if that's okay. Please. If we have time to do that, is the Research Integration Center. That's kind of our headquarters and really the kind of the brain trust for the entire complex, because it has all the things, the purposely built things that you would need in order to integrate the other two facilities, which I'll talk about. From the time that we brokered this deal with Army Futures Command and Department of Defense, we're moving in less than 2 years, we're moving into this unique, purposely built facility, unheard of on the federal government side. Having been in the Pentagon, parolee of the Pentagon 3 different times, I would say that, just to get a meeting together in 6 months is difficult. I mean, we're moving in less than 2 years, 90,000 square feet, and really, state of the art. So that's the first set of facilities, first facility. The second one is the Innovation Proving Ground. So think of a 200-acre outdoor laboratory. So think of this as a place that we can do military relevant testing on ground and air type autonomous vehicles. We could do things with our 5G network out there that talks to what the future war is going to be. So if we have autonomous vehicles, either air or ground air, that they can speak to each other, but how do you do that in a challenged or degraded environment, which makes it really tough. And then so we are going to have, fording sites with cross current. We'll be able to change the soil, be able to change the different gradients of the different hills that we put back there, and that's really to put military vehicles, air and ground, through their testing in order to make sure that what we give to our young men and women out in Department of Defense, these young troopers, we give them the best that the America has to offer. Having two sons in this, I've skin in the game, as you know, so it's important for me to get that mission accomplished for our future kind of troopers, warfighters. The last piece, the last facility, is this ballistic aero optics and materials test range. That's a mouthful, but what that is it's a hypersonics test range. Basically, it's enclosed. It is going to be 1 kilometer long when complete. We're going to do it in 2 phases. 500 meters is the first phase. Second phase is 500 meters. And the reason why we're breaking it up is the largest in the United States is owned by the government, and it's 300 meters. So we're building something almost 3 times the size of the current largest facility. And ours will be more instrumented. Ours will be able to do a lot more in terms of testing hypersonics and directed energy and laser diagnostics. So people ask what hypersonics is. It's projectiles, or it's being able to move 5 times the speed of sound. So Mach 5. Our tunnel will be able to go to Mach 15 if need be. We'd like to keep the sweet spot at Mach 10 with a 6 kilogram payload. But if you lessen the payload, we can go faster. So these are the types of things that makes up the complex. But the real secret sauce are the people, right? Absolutely. That is really our superpower. We have great people that are dedicated to national security research. And our mission, if I were to kind of break it down into something very simple, because I'm a simple person, it's to try to get these technologies, these research areas from out of the labs into the hands of young servicemen and women as fast as we can, right?
Everything you said could be a whole podcast on its own. That is a tremendous amount of technologies, resources, experience, knowledge, all the personnel. But for the sake of our listeners, why? Why Bryan College Station? Right. How was this site selected? How was a partnership with the university selected? Why? And how is it happening so fast?
Right. I'm going to break that down a little bit, and I'm going to do a little bit of history lesson. And I hate to do this, but I think it's important for everybody to understand the foundation of what you're asking, the why.
Absolutely.
So in my previous life, when I was wearing uniform, my last job was as the executive officer to the commanding general of Army Futures Command. So Army Futures Command was the largest reorganization in the Army since 1973. So I was a part of that. I actually, even before taking over, I was part of the design team to really build out Army Futures Command. And the idea really was to accelerate modernization for the Army. Because if you think of the Army modernizing once every 40 years, we're already behind. And people say, why do you modernize every 40 years? My answer would be, it'd be too expensive to do it at a quicker pace, right? So if you look at the tanks that we have, those tanks are from 40 years ago and counting, right? And the same thing with the weaponry and all that. And the reason why I think things have slowed down, or I know things have slowed down, is for over 20 years, the Army has been focused, Department of Defense has been focused on Iraq and Afghanistan. So if I could, again, simplify how the budget process works, because it's very complicated. I would say if you think of 3 levers that are sensitive to each other, first being people and benefits, which is the lion's share of most companies' business, right? The second is training and operation. So think of operation being Iraq and Afghanistan, and then the train up. And then the last knob is, or the last lever is modernization. And they're all sensitive. If you have 2 on full blast, then something's got to be turned off.
Right.
In modernization, not was turned off, but it was really slowed down because a majority of the lion's share of the budget was going to where it should have, right? The training and operations, and then also for people and benefits. So now you are at a place for 20 years, our near peer adversaries have been focused on the technologies that honestly we are working on now. So it's almost as if they had a 20-year head start. So we got to Army Futures Command. We got to Austin, made that decision in August of 2018. Our first visit here was in October 2018, and then we finally were able to work on what we needed to broker a deal in October of 2019. And less than 2 years, we moved into this Research Integration Center. And really the momentum piece and the vision piece came from Chancellor Sharp and Dr. Kathy Banks, right? Kathy Banks at that time was not the president. She was the vice chancellor for engineering and the dean of engineering, director of TEAS. And that's really the vision that they showed us of what they can do given a strategic partner. So they had facilities already, but they said we can basically take this to the next level if we had a strategic partner. And the Army wholeheartedly said, we will be that strategic partner. So that's how that relationship was really born. And they, the momentum that Dr. Banks and Chancellor Sharp, basically we are riding on their jet stream, right? They are taking us to where we need to get to. They back us 100%. So without them, the momentum wouldn't be there. And I would, the vision is really important.
Yes.
But without resources, a vision is just a good idea, right?
Absolutely.
But with the resources that they provided through the state legislator, $50 million, the Board of Regents, $80 million, and the rest of it coming from Army Futures Command, really those are the key ingredients in order to, put the George H.W. Bush Combat Development Complex on the ground at Rellis.
That is so, for me as a Texan, of course, working for TEAS and the university, it makes me so proud, and I love hearing that. So thank you for the history lesson. I think that's important for not only me, but our audience. And it makes me so proud of our leadership that they have the vision and the gusto to take it on, because these are no small feats. Yeah. And anything dealing with, I would imagine, I don't have military background, but I have great appreciation that it would take a lot of planning and a lot of partnerships being made.
That's
it's quite impressive. Very, very impressive. And again, back to understanding. I understand the why at Bryan College Station. I get that. But I think it's important for our audience to hear, because I think unless you have a connection in some sort or you live in the area, most of the audience may not be aware of this amazing complex because they're not in certain circles or they're not here. So thank you for sharing that. And I love, again, the fact that, A&M is leading the charge in this way, but Texas having this leadership role. And to me, again, I'm a novice in all things military, but I have to understand, trying to be a global citizen myself, is that the way we understand combat and how we look at former or current adversaries is that changes. Yep. And it's changed drastically in the last 20 years, how you identify them and how you manage them, so to speak. So I'm sure this is all part of the complex. So it's exciting.
And this is, for us, this is about deterrence, right? I
Absolutely.
mean, this is not about, hey, anybody who wants to go to war. This is about deterrence and being able to project from a position of power.
Absolutely.
So without being in a position of power, it's hard to have the leverage that you need at the diplomatic table.
Absolutely.
So that's important. I think that's a key aspect. But if we have to go to war, I think, again, it seems like the military is becoming more of a family affair these days. We want it to be an unfair fight, right? I mean, I don't want to send my own kids into a fight that's going to be a fair fight, because we are a nation that is used to being in a position where we're the most innovative, where we're the most lethal, where we're the most revered, company or country in the world, and we need to stay that way. And the way that we do that is, we have to lead in all areas. Economically, we need to lead. Militarily, we need to lead. Diplomatically, we need to lead. So I think this is not about, Texas A&M. This is really not about Texas. This is really about being this national gem for the United States, right?
Absolutely.
That's in Central Texas. And a lot of people don't know about it.
Right.
Many more are learning about it. And it's really getting the word out. And, this is just one of the ways to get the word out. And part of my remit is up and out. So this is very helpful. So.
Well, again, great appreciation. And some of the things that you just said made me think of lots of different areas that I want to go. One of those things is about, deterrence. And I think that's important that people understand a lot of times, because sometimes when you bring up anything military, it's always on the side of aggression. But I thank you for bringing that up. And also, I have to bring up a couple of points because you were saying them, and I think, oh my goodness, we need to talk about that. And also the amount of technology that is being developed, that is being enhanced and improved upon there at your site is tremendous, because so many of the technologies that we use here at this table, our iPhones, that all came from the origination of what's been done within the military system. So what is good for the development there eventually trickles down to common day use.
That's right.
And one other aspect, and please speak on all these, but what you said, and I think it's critical because I've heard a lot of the discussion being about the family affair, what military seems to be becoming. And I've heard it said in many different ways, but I wonder what you mean by that, about the military appearing or becoming a family affair. What does that mean to you?
I think just because I'll just speak for my own family. I can give you about 100 examples of people that I know whose children are in the military.
Yes.
I'll just speak for mine. I mean, so they see the passion that you have for soldiering and for other people, and I think the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, right? I used to have an event. My wife and I used to host an event called, this is when I was in battalion command. I was actually in Schofield Barracks, Hawaii, and I think we carried it on even when we deployed to Afghanistan. And we used to call it, or the battalion was called the Warfighter Battalion, and we used to have this thing called the Warfighter Spotlight. And what I would do out of the 1,250 soldiers that we had, I would have the organization pick one junior officer, like a lieutenant, one non-commissioned officer, sergeant, and then one young enlisted soldier. And we would cut out on one day a month at 2:00 in the afternoon, 1400, and we'd play a sport and get to know them. And then I would tell them, listen, it is now 4:00, 1600. In 2 hours, I want you to grab your families and then bring them over to my house, and we'll have pizza or a barbecue or something. And we were already set up for it. And first there's unease because we don't want to bring our families to the battalion commander's house. But when they show up with their kids and spouses, one of the first things I do is have the soldier or officer or non-commissioned officer talk a little bit about themselves and why they joined the Army. And you heard everything from it's a family tradition to I had no other option. And to have your young kids listen to that month after month and hear what people in the Army, all different walks of life, as I said, is overwhelming, I think, because I think they see the passion in what these soldiers are doing and why they stay in, and why their families stay in, right? Because you recruit the soldier, but you retain the family. Because if the families aren't happy, the soldier's not staying in because it's a bad combination. So that was a long kind of an answer to why I just kind of give you the lens that these kids are looking at. And then, the more senior you get, the more things you get to do. So we had PT, and the kids would like to go to PT with me. And, obviously all the sergeants and my command sergeant majors like, sure, sir, bring your kids to PT, no problem. And they would run around and run in formation, and I think it just grew on them.
Well, I think there's nothing like the stories that we share to share appreciation, understanding, and I think that's the power of this podcast and you being with us today.
Thank you.
So thank you for that. But as we begin, because I'm trying to be sensitive to the time. I know your schedule is demanding, but as we begin to wind down, I have to go back to your many degrees, sir. So of all your degrees, and I'm a lifelong learner myself,
Yes.
and I love it when I see people that have many degrees and certifications and all the things. But if you had to choose one of those degrees, which one left the most impact in your life, in the stage you're in right now?
I would say the Master of Science in Adult Education. Because I am, too, a lifelong learner, and I think that's important. And I think it's important. It goes also to the whole leadership and the study of people, right?
Yes.
How do people learn? What motivates them?
Yes.
Then it's really there's an art and science of that as well. So I think for me, and where I'm at now, I think that's, the national security policy and resource strategy and MBAs, those are really interesting. But if one of those touched people, it would be the education Master of Science.
Hearts and minds.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
So, and I'd be remiss, and I've been wanting to say this, and I know this is probably out of turn to say it now, but there's different ways to serve in national security, right? And what we're building on the Rellis campus is like this national security research ecosystem, and you don't have to wear a uniform, right? You can be a scientist, you can be an engineer, you can be a program manager, and serve in the national security capacity. I don't want anybody to be confused about the only way to serve your country is wearing a uniform. That's a way. That was what I chose. But what I would challenge people to think about is there are DOD labs, Department of Defense labs, there are Department of Energy labs, there's all these different types of labs that are just as important to the mission, and the mission being, how do we keep the United States the greatest country in the world? There's different capacities to serve. I need to get that out before Valerie, you cut me off and say that you give me the hook, because I don't know when that's coming. I'm sure it's soon, but that is really important to me, and I think young people just need to be exposed to the options. So when you grow up in the inner city, or you grow up in suburbia, if you grow up in the country, unless you have people that are in those circles or have experience, you may not know that's an option.
That's wonderfully said, because that is true. I think most people, they underestimate their influence in what they do day to day, and especially as being a citizen of your community, large and small, you just forget, or you're just not aware of the service that you can play a part of. So thank you for pointing that out. And I would never cut you off, because I always want you to have all your messages made and sent. And as we do close out, are there any final thoughts, and especially to our young people, maybe that you think that they need to hear specifically from Colonel Guieb, maybe from the executive director? What would you like to say? That
if you put your mind to it, you can do anything that you want to. Don't take no, or don't take failure as an opportunity to stop doing what you are passionate about. You take that as an opportunity to challenge yourselves to do the best that you can do. And if you can use your powers for good, and that is good, the good of humanity, I think it will be so rewarding. Like, the money and the salaries and all those are really important, and it will get you to part of where you need to get to. But if you do it for the good of your organization, if you do it for the good of the country, I think it will not only make you a more well-rounded person, it will make your family that much more appreciative of the country. And I'm Val, you know this. I have a hard time saying no, especially to you. So if there's a way that I can help, with young people and help them with their motivation to learn or be exposed to national security research, I'm happy to help.
Well, thank you. And I know you mean it, because you're one of our wonderful contributors to our Clean Smarts Masterclass. So those of you that have not checked that out, please do. And in closing, I want to ask you one more thing.
Sure.
Do you have a favorite quote or mantra that you can close us out on?
Ooh, gosh, there's a lot I could talk about, but I like the golden rule. Right.
For those that don't know,
do unto others as you would want done to you. Right. So I am all about dignity and respect. I'm all about character over competence, because we can teach the competence piece. Sometimes teaching the character piece is more difficult. Right. So how we accomplish our missions with our our head held up high is really important. That you have to be happy with the way you got to your end state, and hopefully it's not a one running over people. It's one where you're side by side with people.
Perfect. Thank you. So as we close out, I want to thank Colonel Guieb once again for his time and his talent and his knowledge that he's sharing today. And to you, our listeners, thank you so much for listening today. Hopefully you've listened to this entire conversation, and please listen in to all the other conversations that we've had. And like Colonel Guieb has mentioned, let's all attempt to live by the golden rule. Let's use our powers for good in our family, our community, and everywhere we go. Thank you, and have a great day.